This is the first frame of our Flash file. This is the first thing that the users are going to see. So let's take a look at the timeline. So right here is our first layer. We're going to give this a name, and we'll just call it intro, because that's our introductory screen of the lesson. And this is in frame 1. This is the first frame of the lesson, the Flash file. So we know we're going to have other layers, because we're going to need a layer here where the user will choose what category of French vocabulary they'd like to learn. So let's give this layer a name of choose. Okay, and then we're going to need a layer for each one of the categories of the vocabulary words that we have. So over here we created, if you recall, when we imported our audio files, we created a folder for clothing, conversation, and food. So we're going to need a layer for each one of those vocabulary categories. So just create one for, whoops, it's just saving our file. Okay, so just create one for food and one for clothing and another one for conversation. Okay, so once we have each one of those layers, okay, we are going to create a new frame on the timeline. So we'll insert a new keyframe at, we'll say, the 5th frame, and then for food, we can insert a keyframe at number 10. And for clothing, we'll insert a keyframe at frame 15. And for conversation, we'll insert a keyframe at frame 20. So now we have our layers, we have each of the conversations. So let's choose the keyframe we just created. Okay, that's where things are going to change from the introductory screen to this screen. Let's bring our little fellow Pierre back in, put him on the page, or the stage rather, and we're going to transform him, make him a little bit smaller again, and then just repositioning him on the page, the stage rather. All right, so there's Pierre. So now we need some way to tell the user which options they have for creating, for going through the lesson. So here when we imported our images, we have one for food, one. So we're going to drag each one of these image files onto the stage. Okay, so these are obviously way too big. So we're going to modify these down and transform and scale, just so we make sure that we're scaling them all at the same size. I'm going to choose this and I think I'll do this to 300. Okay, let's see how big that is. Okay, that's still too big. So we're going to try it down. We'll go to 100. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, so now I'm going to drag that over and place that onto the stage. And we'll do the same thing with the conversation and clothing images. So I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and highlight those, and I'm going to use Modify, Align, Top, so that they're all in a row. And while they're still highlighted and selected, I can drag them all as a group even though they are individual images right now, just so we can see what's going on here. Okay, so now we have 3 buttons essentially for the categories of options that we have. So we want to make sure that these are clickable and accessible from ActionScript. So we're going to highlight this whole button and we're going to go Modify, Group, and just like we did on the introductory screen with the Start button, we're going to right click here and choose Convert to Symbol. And then we're going to call this Clothing Button and export for ActionScript. And then we're going to go, oops, Clothing Button. Okay. Okay. And we're just going to do the same thing with the other category buttons. Okay, so now we have instances in the library of these buttons. We have all the triggers set up so that we can manipulate these buttons and have something happen when a user clicks on them. First, let's go back to the timeline. So the clothing, let's take a look. That started, we put a frame here on frame 15. So if we go back to our choose, we want to be able to have the user click on the clothing button and jump to frame 15. So in order to make that happen, we're going to have to call in our action script, and I'll show that in just a moment. We want to be able to have these individual buttons that we just created clickable when the user clicks on them, have them actually do something. So this is where ActionScript comes in. And as you recall, when we clicked on these, we created these instance names, and those are what we're going to use right now in ActionScript in order to make something happen. Choose Window and Actions, and right now we're on in the choose, it says here the layer name and then the frame number. As you remember, this is the choose layer and we're in frame 5. And I've pasted some of the code in here to make this work, but I'm going to expand this window and we'll go through it. So this is the instance name, as you see up here. The instance name is conversation button. And we have, so we're naming this button conversation right here. And what we're doing is we're adding an event listener to that button and a mouse event. And the mouse event is a click. And then when that mouse event click is heard by this event listener, it's going to run a function. And what we want it to do is take us to the screen where the conversation vocabulary words are listed. So we want it to jump to another screen. And then inside these curly brackets right here is what we want it to do. So this is actually incorrect. So we have conversation. We've noted, if you look at the timeline down here, conversation begins on frame 20. So what we want to do is put frame 20 in this parentheses. So we're going to do the same thing for the food button. So let's take a look down here at the timeline, and we see that food begins on frame 10. So it's already at 10, so that's fine. And all the other aspects are the same. So we have the button mode on, we're calling the food button, we've given it the function name, the function is called, and it goes to this. This will do something. So what we're going to do is go control and test. Okay, so what happens now is we should be able to click on this button and go to the choose screen. Hey, and that works. And if we were to click on each one of these buttons, they'll go to their corresponding screens, which are currently blank, but we'll be adding those text, those English terms in just a minute. So if we click, but if you notice, there's a problem because once you click, we don't have a way to get back to choose a different category. So that's one of the things we'll be adding in a bit is some navigation here to at least go back to that selection screen to choose another category.